Welcome, everyone, to the Cardano Effect podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to take high-level developer information and projects that are occurring within the Cardano space and break them down into bite-sized, consumable pieces of information for everyday use. I'm your host, Philippe, and let's get this podcast started. The hosts of the Cardano Effect podcast today are Rick and myself, as usual. We'd like to thank each and every one of you for signing in, logging in, listening to us, and supporting the podcast. Please consider hitting that subscribe button, like, comment, share. We hope that everyone is doing well during these tumultuous times. We hope that we can provide you some educational and informative content to help pass the time. So we have a very special guest who Rick will be announcing very shortly. So without further ado, none of what we say on this podcast is financial advice. Remember, you are your best financial advisor. And if you don't think you are, you need to find someone who's qualified to do so. So without further ado, Rick, how are you doing this afternoon? What's going on? What's happening?
Hey, I'm doing great, Philippe. All my friends are healthy and family, coronavirus free, so I can be grateful for that. I'm glad for that. I'm also appreciative of the Cardano Foundation for sponsoring this podcast. Thank you very much, Cardano Foundation, for that. We have a very special guest today, Aparna Jue. She is the Cardano Product Director at IOHK. I kind of call it second in command kind of thing. So she's an executive over at IOHK. Welcome, Aparna. Glad to have you here today. How are you doing, and where are you calling in from?
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Philippe. This has been great. I appreciate being on the show. And I also mirror the same gratefulness you have, Rick. Nobody in my family or nobody that I know has been hit by the virus, but I do know a lot of people in the community in general have. So it's very interesting times, and our thoughts are with everybody as usual. And yes, I'm calling in from Atlanta, Georgia. It's nice and springtime over here. So it's actually a beautiful day outside. It's just that we're all stuck inside.
All right. Well, welcome from warm, sunny Atlanta, Georgia. Appreciate you being here, Aparna.
Absolutely.
So we're going to hit the hardest questions first because we got some good viewership here at the Cardano Effect. And the first question is the toughest. When will we have Shelly mainnet? When mainnet?
I knew you were going to come with that one. And you know what? It's one that we're all wanting to answer. It's not just our community. It's also internally. That's what this entire journey has been about, is when can Shelly get started? Because that is the pillar of decentralization. It's the pillar of having a stability, a stable base and a foundation on top of Byron to be able to build the rest of the blockchain infrastructure on. So the way we're running things, Rick, is basically doing rollouts. And I introduced the concept of a rollout with the Byron reboot that we had just done on March 31st. And what a rollout is really, we don't try and put all the features in at once. So, and the reason being is because a lot of these features are really technology forward. They do have a lot of core testing on it, but there's still the user testing part that isn't really been done, for example, on home networks and things of that nature. So we want to be careful about releasing software in one big bang and saying, here it is, big fireworks. I'd love to do that. In my past career, I've done that a lot with products, but this particular product, we really need to take it as steps. And that's why we call it a rollout as opposed to a big launch. So with that being said, what we're planning to do is do a testnet rollout of Shelly first. That is going to have a certain level of security features, a certain level of decentralization, a certain level of user testing criteria that we'd like to first put on. It'll be somewhat of a closed launch. And what I mean by that is we'll invite our stake pool holders and invite some people in to start testing it. And we'll do very quick iterations. So a couple of weeks, the next one comes out. And then we'll open up a little bit more. A couple of weeks, open it up a little bit more. We're hoping to be done with this whole kind of iteration and rolling out by Q2, by the end of Q2. And that's kind of what we would call feature complete. But in an agile sprint delivery methodology, you're always going to be innovating on those core features, whether it be the ledger or the consensus or the network. There's always going to be certain things that we're going to put into it that will continuously develop on, right, and continuously release. So even though it might be feature complete, say Q2, that doesn't mean we're not going to keep improving as we hear, as more people get onto it and we hear more feedback and there's something else we wanted to put into it. So hopefully that helps. I don't want to, I'm not comfortable just saying June 30th, we're a lock. But as we get closer, you'll kind of see the magic of doing this rollout, and hopefully the community will be happy being more involved in how we're doing this. And the key to all of it is really communicating and telling the community what is it that we're rolling out and what we're expecting from the rollout, like what sort of tests we're expecting that we want to bring back in to iterate on. So that concept we're testing with Flight. It's only been a few days right now, but it seems to be working pretty well, and I'm hoping that will be a really good bringing us together with the community as Shelly gets launched.
Yeah, as Flight gets out there and tested. All right. Well, thank you for that response. And I would just like to note, most of our viewers already know this. The crypto world has this strange expectation for a roadmap, because between 2017, 2018, 2019, and I'm not talking about just Cardano, I'm talking about all crypto projects, were really bad about putting out a roadmap and building expectations, failed to manage expectations, then failed to meet the roadmap release, then disappointed the people in the crypto world. And I got to be honest with you, I think like TA, technical analysis, is a little bit of witchcraft and a little bit of dice rolling there. But at least TA has been more accurate than crypto roadmaps. I got to just be honest with you. I got to tell you, it's true, isn't it, Philippe?
I second that.
TA is pretty bad. You can flip a coin and be more accurate than TA.
You could.
I'm going to get out my chicken bones, Philippe. But the roadmaps, though, so like the Shelly Road Map for last year, it's Shelly released in technically December of 2019 because the ITN was deployed, right?
Sure.
So Shelly was out on the street, people were eligible, and it's working well. The testnet is working well, but we're still going through these iterations of the wallets. And now Q2, end of Q2 is the best target date we can shoot for right now. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, you're going to see rollouts prior to that. You're going to definitely see rollouts of the testnet of the Haskell version of Shelly testnet prior to that. We're thinking more of a feature complete when we're really gotten some of the user testing at the end of Q2.
Okay.
And the roadmap question, it's not just crypto, Rick. So I've been in many industries, right, from a product background side, and everybody loves roadmaps. Now, if you're building something like maybe an encoder or something like a hard piece of hardware that's going to do something innovative for a mechanical type of application, then it makes sense to have a roadmap. You're going to have a certain feature and functionality, and then, by Q3, you'll have this. By the next year of this time, you'll have this. And it's a very waterfall driven type of development cycle. And it works really well for that because you really do have to have features tested for certain hardware pieces. You can't just say, oh, it's just an MVP and then try it out and tell me if it fails. Can't do that usually with hardware. So with software, I kind of second what you're saying, right? So I'm somewhat new to the crypto and the blockchain space. I've always been on the other side where I was evaluating blockchain. I wasn't really building blockchain. And I saw the same thing, right? So when you look at everybody in the space, they tend to have a lot of big ideas and they tend to have a lot of roadmaps. They're very visionary in mind. And actually, that's what brings me to it. I actually love that about it because blockchain can do so many wonderful things and the vision is truly there. It is truly a disruptive technology. So it's hard to kind of pull back from that and not get people really excited about this alternate operating system, right? So I understand the founders and I understand the technologists and I understand why they come up with that the visionary side. Now, bridging that to reality, then that's a different thing. And that's where you get all these roadmaps and you get the community kind of asking for stuff and not getting what they're hoping to get out of it. So that's kind of where I come in, and that's where the product teams come in. Right. So as we're building out, we want to hit the vision. We want to get as close to this vision as possible because that's the definition of success at the end of the day. But in order to get there, there are these small, non-glamorous steps that we need to take. Right. So to get to decentralization, there may be certain, it has to come up with block production first before you can even get to the networking infrastructure side of things, or to get to security, you've got to maybe go through some really simple steps first before you can get to the final security, or to get to even governance, right? Governance as a whole, there's a whole social impact to how we can govern blockchains, and how do we vote on improvements, and how do we put those improvements in, who gets to do that, and how do they get to do that. All of that seems really cool when you think of it from a vision standpoint, but the actuals and how you put it together is not really that cool. The steps kind of come one at a time, and maybe like a year from now or 2 years from now, when we look back, we're like, oh wow, we've made this much progress, but it won't feel like that as we're going through it. So I'll tell you what my view and my take on roadmaps is. I like to provide roadmaps in terms of themes and buckets and quarters. And that's my personal view of things. That way I can tell you that by Q2, this is what I'd like to do, Rick, and this is what I'd like to do, community. I'd like to test out Shelly up until this particular point. After that, I do want to start working on smart contracts, and I also want to start working on some voting mechanics, but I'm still not going to be complete with Shelly. I'm still going to continuously improve it till I get to that vision state. So I don't like to give roadmaps because it sets a false sense of security. However, what I do like to do to give that level of security to our people, to our community members, is say that these are the features that I am going to give you within the next month to 2 months to 3 months, and this is what I'd like you to test. And hopefully that would be enough for now, and we keep doing that, and that's my roadmap.
All right. Well, that sounds good. I think that's a good tack to take because, in the past, the timeline estimates have been so far off, and so we don't want people to be getting disappointed about it again. I try to be a little realistic about it. And I noticed you mentioned about with the waterfall and the agile, and Philippe, I remember Philippe talking about this before. Philippe, don't you have questions based on waterfall and agile?
Yes, because what first drew me to this project, there are a couple things that drew me to this project, but I can say along with Rick and many people who I speak to, that roadmap at the beginning in 2017 was very impressive. That dream board hitting these milestones, you have Byron, Shelley, Gauguin, Voltaire, and Basho, but just recently we just did the Byron reboot. So to the untrained eye, that is just coming to the crypto community or just coming to the Cardano project, they can match that up to the roadmap and say, oh, we're still in phase one. I know that things are being worked in parallel, but is there, I guess I'm getting a little bit off track here, but when we were talking about waterfall versus agile approaches, you're pushing this project as far as an agile approach to launching the product. So you're valuing community feedback and adjusting as you go. But the whole way that the project is designed is this waterfall method. So I don't know how you can implement both strategically, and how do they both coincide with each other in order to push the project forward? Because it seems like it conflicts. How can you be completely waterfall in one area and then agile in the other? I don't know.
Absolutely. That's an excellent question. Excellent observation as well, right? So you have to reimagine the roadmap. That roadmap is very impressive. And it comes to us in terms of eras. You have Byron, and then you have Shelley, and then Gauguin, and then Basho and Voltaire. Now, if you really take a step back from it, which I've been lucky enough to be able to do, coming in kind of new with a different viewpoint, is when you look at it, they're more so themes. They're pillars of the blockchain. They're pillars of a certain problem statement that we need to solve. Byron is foundational, so that is waterfall in nature. Without a foundation, you can't really build anything else on it. But when it comes to Shelley with decentralization, and then when you come to scalability, smart contracts, treasury, and voting, you can take bits and pieces of the rest and start working on them in parallel and testing them out in an agile approach without having to layer or wait for one to do the other. Will I get a complete end-to-end cryptocurrency or blockchain? No, I can't just release one and not the other. They're still modular pieces of the architecture, but I can work on them in parallel, which is the point of the agile, right? So bringing in the community to test maybe the governance structure, or bringing in the community to test maybe the smart contracts feature and the playgrounds or whatnot that we want to do, while we're still working on some of the foundational bits of Shelley, or we're working on a different approach for Gauguin on Plutus, on the language that we've created there. So it is a great question. It's just a matter of semantics, because if I had to do this in waterfall, that's where I think a lot of the frustration of the community is coming from, is because you end up having to wait and wait. And that is actually a choice of how our company does things. We research, we apply formal methodology, we test, and we release. It's almost like if I had to choose a blockchain from coming from the other side, this is the one I would choose, because I feel the least risk to what I need to do lies in this methodology. But it can also mean timelines are a nightmare. So the key things that when you're looking at a product manager or project manager, it's triangulated. It's like time, scope, budget. And those are your three. You can't always usually get all three of them at the same time. So what I'm planning to do is de-scope it a little bit so that I can get out chunks of this quicker to test. And that way, no one's waiting for that big bang, right? It goes back to that whole big bang. So it is kind of still a little bit of waterfall. I'm not going to lie, but we're trying to make it the most agile we possibly can.
It almost sounds like in your description that at a very high level, it's waterfall throughout the eras, but at the micro level, it's agile week to week
with the features. Yeah, that's a good way to look at. That's a good way to look at it. It's a good way to look at it. And we're trying to figure out how we can bring stuff in that's more modular so they can fit better in a way that we test quicker. But yes, what you just said is definitely a good way to look at it.
Okay. Cool. All right. So we have a lot of Reddit questions.
Yes. Let's start hitting them.
Okay. And I got to tell you, we have a lot, and we have a super ninja Redditor here, General Zod, who basically scripted a podcast here. His first question was, it starts off with, how long have you been IOHK? But I would like to take it a step back for a minute. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Where'd you come from? What'd you do before you came over to IOHK?
Sure. Yeah. It depends on how far back you want to go, but we were looking through this when we had some audio checks, and you had asked me if I was a computer engineer. That is what I am. So I went to Georgia Tech, and I am a computer and electrical engineer. And funny thing is, I've never used it a lick in my career. I went straight from computer engineering degree. I did some material science coursework from graduate school, and I went into more like a consulting type of a thing for problem solving and manufacturing and things like that. So we would look at manufacturing lines, any goods you can potentially produce, and how to spot check quality issues and how to get those better and all sorts of things. So it was very hardware driven. There was some software in the sensors itself, but it was a lot of hardware back in the day. But since then, I've really gotten into product management where, if you think of a superpower, for me, it's really just looking through a lot of chaos and being able to focus in on what is the problem that I'm trying to solve with this particular product that we want to build. So when you look at it from the lens of that, you don't look at it from the technology. The technology is really cool, but you look at it from what is it actually going to end up solving that's going to make this stick. And if you look at it from that approach of things, and even Steve Jobs, that's his one line. And I'm a big Apple fan, being a product person, but they look at it from the user, the market centric approach. What am I solving? And then they're building it out. They build out their products based on that. And I've been very fortunate to be a part of a lot of innovation products, a lot of disruptive innovation products that could have exponential uses in the market. And that's what I'm drawn to. So I worked for large Fortune 100 and 500 companies in that regards, in that capacity. And I left for this space because I truly believe in what we're doing here eventually will drive to that vision that we talked about in the beginning. But I do know that there are some steps that we need to take before we get there. So my background, I've been here now since November. So not that long, but it feels in the blockchain world, as someone said, it was like dog years. It kind of is like dog years. I feel almost like an expert at this point. And then sometimes I feel far from it. I learn every day. I learn so many things, just talking to the different people within our organization, talking to our community members, talking to partners. Oh, my goodness. And I'm like, wow, you get humbled every day because there's so much in this space that you don't know. And since November, I have taken a look at Cardano, and my job is really to build and lead a great team of people that can deliver this to its vision, but also start out with what we call the minimally viable offering of the platform. Like, what can the market take in the quickest amount of time that's going to be useful to solving their problems and giving them what they want? And then we start looking at an innovation pipeline on what do I build on top of it to make this just wow and great? What are the wow factors that we need to look at? So it's really organizing the entire team, the processes, and the solution around those three pillars.
All right. Sounds like you got a tough road ahead of you.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, the user feedback I've seen so far, people are pretty happy with the mainnet federated version of Daedalus as far as the people go, but you're looking at the whole product. You're looking at the big giant scope. People are pretty happy with the mainnet federated version, but the testnet and the decentralized versions are they're getting a little frustrated. They're like, oh God, not again.
Okay.
It happens.
Understand.
I know, I get that way too. There we go. You probably see a lot of feedback summaries, like here's how many people complained about this, and maybe I don't know.
We do. We're trying to triage a lot better, especially because we actually have products to get that feedback on, right? So from the ITN, and then also from this recent flight, because we've had we've had our issues with flight as well. But that's what flight was for. It was for getting the feedback on that and learning where we need to get better. And the team's been doing an excellent job of trying to fix real time and get the product back out there for people to download and use. But absolutely. So we have, my team has daily calls, and we get pulled in all the time, especially if there's anything that is pretty important around sync times or connection times, things that we really want to test for the foundational layer.
Okay.
All right, cool.
All right.
Okay, Philippe, you want to take us through General Zod's?
Yes. Second question. So General Zod says, can you explain your role and responsibilities as a product director? So I think you already went into this, but if you want to go into more detail or add something, now's the time.
Sure. Let me tell you my experience here. So as a product director here in the blockchain space, in the crypto world, with IOHK, it's really about how do we make this technology and humanize it a little bit. So it's not only about the ADA, and it's not only about the staking, and it is about that as well, but it's also about the bigger vision that we're trying to build. So how do we make this platform work for where we can put use cases on it, and those use cases can then bring us the recognition, not just for us, but also for blockchain. It's humanizing blockchain. It's putting a face to blockchain. And I bring that from my past experience where I come from, in which I was building regulatory solutions for tracking and tracing regulated goods. And a lot of times you're checking serial numbers of certain goods to match up. It could be pharmaceuticals, it could be tobacco, firearms, explosives, anything that you really want to keep a track of, to make sure that you know where it is. The governments usually are mostly interested in those sort of solutions. And we were looking for blockchain at the time when I was on the other side of the fence, because it was actually mandated by one of the governing bodies that we wanted security and immutability built into the data, and blockchain is the best solution. So figure out how I can make this solution I was building, merge it with blockchain, put it back out there. And at that time, when I was looking at blockchain, I was thinking, okay, a lot of our guys don't understand blockchain. A lot of our people, how am I going to sell that to my executive management at the company I was with? It was just a cool buzzword more so, so understanding what it can potentially bring and how that technology builds up to that is kind of key. And my role and responsibility here with IO is really doing that. It's finding out, okay, so why does decentralization really matter? Why does security really matter? Why does privacy really matter? Is creating those use cases and those stories around it. And what I like to call, it's the product story. So Cardano has a story, but the components within Cardano have a story. So within Shelly, you've got the node, you've got the wallet, you've got the backend and the APIs and the integration layer. All of them have a story of their own. They all serve a different purpose. They serve a different user persona. And you really have to understand, who are you talking to? Who are you designing for? Why are you designing this? What is the best outcome? And then you go back to your tech team and say, okay, this is the problem I want to solve. What is the best approach to do it? Is it formal methodology? Is it using a third party widget? How can I do this better? I can tell them I want this to be interoperable with different wallet types. This is why, because the majority of people hold these sort of wallets. Or I want this to be tested on Windows, for example. Why? Because the majority of our users have Windows and they're going to run the node on Windows. So it's really that question of why. It might seem so simple, but it's not really that simple. It's a different way of thinking. Hopefully that answers that.
No, I think it does, and it segues to the next question really well. Go ahead, Philippe.
What are some of the main challenges the team has overcome since you've come on board?
Okay, so that's a great one. And I'm not going to say anything negative because our team's great. Our team is just, it's a great team. Like I told you, I'm learning a lot. I remember the first day I joined the company, I think I had to sit down with a couple of our technical architects and just kind of, get to know them a little bit. And they started launching off into, proof of stake and Ouroboros and Genesis and Block. And I was just, it was like me shaking my head, like just writing furiously, like, okay, I'm going to have to research all of this afterwards. And they were very nice. They ended up giving me some, video tutorials of stuff that they've done to get me up to speed. But this is not something you have in your everyday conversations. I can't go to some of my friends or my husband and start talking about this stuff, and he'll be like, what are you talking about? So the team has really had to come together as a product team. So in the past, product teams have been looked at more as a technical transcriber. And what I mean by that is take this technology and figure out how to work with the dev teams to put all those user stories and tasks and make them work. That is not really what we do. We also have to prioritize, especially if we're changing to delivery-led organization. It's prioritizing which features need to be minimally acceptable. Like, what do I have to put into this release to get this out? Because we have a backlog of like 100 ideas and 100 features. Can't get them all in because that's when you guys start complaining and be like, oh, it's going to be another 2 years before you guys bring the product out. It will be another 2 years if we do it that way. But if we do it in increments and start looking at, okay, so within this feature, what is the minimal I can get in where it's working and it's good, but it's not absolutely perfect just yet. It's prioritizing that. That takes a sense of understanding who your users are and then being able to convert what I call voice of customer to the voice of designer. And it's to the technical architects. You have to be a little bit of a bridge and give them that sense of a prioritization. So that was something that we're overcoming. Processes are another one. When you have a startup organization, they go through some level of chaos, as we call growing pains. IO is no exception. Cardano is no exception. We're starting to now roll with what we've got in the docket, which is very exciting. But when I first came on, there was just a lot of okay, what's next? I mean, it was very visionary. It was also very much mired in research and technology, and getting the product team organized to where they started looking at themselves as an accountable unit and not just, I just deliver the node or I just deliver a consensus or I just deliver a network. None of them work on their own, right? They kind of they're a family. So bringing us together in a family, and it's not just me, it's everybody had to come together to make these changes as a part of the growing pains. And our organization has done a great job. We hired a CTO. We've got a commercial lead. Charles has been wonderful with the direction that we're getting. We're formalizing product marketing. It's under my organization right now. So I've got product management, product marketing, which is great. I'm planning to add user experience as well. So not just UI design, but actual how you are interacting with the product and what buttons do you like to click and how many clicks do you need to get through to get to what you need to do? How does it visually appear? Those are all really good planning material that we need. So bringing all of that on board is happening as we speak. There's just a ton of work going on in Cardano right now.
Yeah, I do have to say that the Daedalus UI is really good.
Glad you like it.
That's been one of the strong points on Daedalus. You got your work cut out for your partner. I do not envy you one bit because the hard part is, get it to stay on in a decentralized environment and not crash. That's the hard part. Translate that.
Well,
You got to translate that
yeah, well,
and show
we're
all the stake
decentralized.
pools.
Yeah, no, I
You've
get
heard it
you.
all, right?
Oh yeah, I'm hearing it. You can keep it coming, but we're a decentralized organization too. My team's all over the place. I've got people in California and I've got people in Europe. So my days start at 6 o'clock, for example, a lot of times, but and they would end pretty late. But that's another challenging part. But we're living what we're building, right? We are decentralized, and our decision making's like that as well. Every team member respects each other. Everybody has the authority to make certain decisions, and we just ensure as a collective that these are the right decisions. So we're truly behaving how we want this product to behave, and that's what we're doing as a team, which is actually a wonderful thing.
Nice.
All right. Rick, you want to get the next question?
Yeah, continuing with General Zod's is, where do you see Cardano in the next 12 months? I don't know how you want to present that. You want to break it out into Basho, Voltaire, Goguen, or something more specific? It's up to you. 12 months from now, where are we at?
I'd actually be a little more general to General Zod's questions. Where I see myself, or where I see the product as well in 12 months, is we've got an end-to-end blockchain cryptocurrency built out. All the eras will have, I would like to call them themes and pillars. All these themes and pillars would have been released in some capacity in a rollout format. So we're constantly testing. I think the community is going to be really happy in about 12 months and where we are, just because what I'm talking about now would have given itself wings and would have been breathing for a little while with the community, this whole sort of delivery organization mindset. And I think at that point, we'd be thinking about how do we add value on top of, so I'm talking about the wow factors, on top of what we've done, and voting on it and on seeing which improvements and enhancements we'd like to put back into the product. So end of Q1 next year, going into another springtime season here in the North American continent, that's where I see us for Cardano.
Okay. So where would that put us? Somewhere in Basho, touching Voltaire, maybe. Just try. You know how guys are. You got to put a meter on it and say, okay, is it faster, slower, bigger, better, stronger?
All of the above.
But, I like your answer. Happy people. As long as the people are happy, then you're right. That's a good way to measure it.
Yeah, we want to keep our user base happy.
All right. Cool. Philippe, next one.
All right. Next question is, do you have a background working with blockchain companies, or is Cardano the first experience? We'll skip that question because you covered it earlier. Mm-hmm. The next question is, you mentioned interesting bugs and issues being caught with the formally verified code. Can you explain further and how beneficial this has been? So I'm assuming that they're really talking about the video that you just jumped on.
Okay.
Yeah. About, did you mention it directly, or was it someone else that mentioned it?
I did.
Okay.
I talked about the formal methodology and some of what of our, what's been somewhat taking us a little longer in doing these things. And, I told you that this blockchain really has a lot that it goes through before it's put out. And that's what de-risks a lot of it from a design perspective and from a coding perspective. And one such area was a property-based testing that the team does. And as our architects describe it, property-based testing is a way to put mathematical formulas for certain properties, and then they test it in a scenario where they can see and measure the behavior around it. And that has caused, and what I talked about, I think, was called exotic bugs. And it is, because these are bugs that a normal QA cycle can't necessarily catch unless they're looking for it. And one of them was, I think I'd mentioned something about sync time, between asynchronous and synchronous block production, and how a certain portion of the block fetch code didn't realize it switched to asynchronous, and it was causing the sync times to actually slow down, which was the opposite effect of the improvement. And there were quite a few of those. There was a couple of others where I can, I'm sure our team can put into. We were trying to write a little blog piece on it, some information on it, just to show you guys what this means. But by doing that, you're testing at the core level of the product. And then we also have our QA testing, which is kind of the outlier. And then we have the user testing now with flight concept and everything we're doing from the betas and the agile delivery method. And we're hoping that all three layers of testing eventually give us such a robust blockchain that it really fulfills the whole higher assurance value proposition that we have for Cardano.
Okay, that's good to hear. I was one of the few people that got to install Flight on the first release.
Yeah, I saw.
It looked good. The CPU ramped up a good bit. There was high CPU usage, but I noticed the Cardano node was running, so it was the Haskell version. So good luck for the rest of the week, and whenever the next one comes out, we'll see how that goes.
Yep,
I have a quick outside question, because this project touts itself as being formally verified using formal methods in order to create processes to create the code that ultimately develops the project. But yet, we go through these iterations, even with the ITN, that things are just broken or things don't work. And this high assurance code that is supposed to be brought with Haskell and brought with the Cardano project, I'm not sure how high assurance it is, because if it crashes, or I know there are going to be bugs, but how valuable is the formal methods and formal verification at this point if there are still a lot of bugs that need to be fixed along the way?
So that's a good question. And I'm probably going to have our technical guys answer that in more detail. But let me give you a little bit of a higher level view on this. So it's not just when you talk about formal methodology, say we apply to the node and the node code itself. There are other portions of the blockchain that have to integrate with the node code in order to give you Shelley's testnet or the ITN, for example. And for example, the wallet, right? The wallet has to interface with the backend that then interfaces with the node, and so on and so forth. So a lot of times what you're seeing is the testing between the integration points that might have some issues, right? I mean, this is all breaking ground for all of us. The formal methodology is more in the design decisions and how we implement certain features and design within the code to make it stable. But there's always going to be certain bugs and certain things that we need to fix on the integration scale. When something is talking to something else, they both might have been written in a formal specification, but how they interact with each other is different. So there's no formal specification around that when they're putting it together. Can we get better at it? That's why we're rolling out the delivery method that we are, is because those are the user-facing things. Like, oh, you know what? My syncing stopped at 80% and it's just stuck there. And then we ask, well, is it a Windows machine, or is it a Linux, or is it Mac OS? We find out it's a Windows. We find about 80% of the complaints coming in from a Windows side, then we know where the issue might be, and we start digging into that. That so far hasn't really hit the formal methods as an issue. It's more about how we are building and putting all the code, the box together. That's my take on it, and I'm sure my team has a much more detailed take on the formal methodology. I personally see a lot of value in the formal methodology. It's still, we're driving it down. So once Shelley gets rolled out, as we get rolled out, we'll see the effects of that in the network. We'll see it in the security. We'll see it in the decentralization. We'll see it in the data standards, in the metadata and other standards. We'll start to see some of those formal methodology high assurances in those key, what the team calls table stakes properties. Hope that makes sense.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, the table stakes doesn't make sense to me, but that's okay. We'll wait for the technical engineer to explain it.
Table stakes is not the technical term. It's more like, if you have a blockchain, then it needs to be secure. It needs to be this. It needs to be that. It needs to have these minimum properties to it. And so that's table stakes. We have to make sure those work, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So the next one was when Shelley Haskell testnet. We already hit that one. June, end of June. Oh, you want to go? You want to change it?
No.
You hit that one earlier, right?
Rick, that's going to be
Q2. Someone's
going to snip that. It's going to be on every single article, crypto Twitter article.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I said it.
Rick said it. I'm saying that we're rolling out.
Okay.
We're rolling out. Haskell.
I'll answer the next question too. The next question, if you want. See, Philippe and I have a rule, Aparna. I don't know if you knew this rule. We have a rule that if we have a guest and the guest cannot answer a question, Philippe and I are forced to answer it. And whatever that answer we give is true until proven otherwise, no matter what the answer is.
All right, guys. If it's not launched, go after Rick.
June. All right, here's the next question. As a matter of fact, I'll say June 21st because it's the longest day of the year, and we're gonna need it. We're gonna need it. Okay. The next question was: how difficult was the transition for stake pool operators? How difficult to switch from the Jormungandr ITN to Haskell testnet, and what is the estimated time frame and duration of the Haskell testnet? You want to take that one, senior engineer, or you can say go fish, and either me or Philippe have to answer it.
Oh no, I don't know if I want you guys to answer it. Even I'm curious as to what you're going to say. So we're coming up with a migration plan for our stake pool operators on the Jormungandr and the ITN testnet to the Haskell one. Yes, there will be some level of involvement. I just don't know what that involvement is. We've just started scoping this out. Trust me, I'm a big user experience person. So we're going to be driving to make sure that the team knows that the users can't have terrible time doing this. So we're going to make it as easy as possible. And that's why when we roll out the Haskell node and the Haskell version, what we're planning to do is invite friends and family type of thing. So people, stake pool operators who have been using the ITN are going to get their first crack at working with us on the migration experience, so we know what this is like for them. And then we hopefully don't have to do anything because we've designed it wonderfully, or if there is some level of improvement that we need to put in there, we will.
Okay, so there'll be a little bit of an iterative approach to the transition process. Okay,
of course, we're in terms of who because we want to be able to make sure we're giving a good experience to everybody. So we'll probably invite a couple of people over to do this, similar to what we did in London, where we had a couple of stake pool operators come in and work with us and giving us great feedback. It would be a similar approach to that, a targeted approach.
Cool. All right. And General Zod, I'll give you a Rick answer, and Rick's answer is June 16th for that one.
Okay.
because it'll run out of money. The testnet will run out of money, and it'll have to end anyway. So drop dead. The escrow runs out. It's over. So it won't be incentivized, even if we're still on Jormungandr. Okay, there's no money left in it.
Oh my goodness. That's going to be.
I should just, you know what? You guys should just answer every question. I'm liking how you guys go about this.
Yeah. See, I'm not. I'm just trying to add some light. People are looking for a number, and it's not going to happen.
A number.
Not from you. All right, Philippe, you want to get the rest one? I can't dig the hole any deeper. I'm going to hand it over to you, Philippe.
We know everyone's going through some troubling times, so we're trying to make it educational and entertaining at the same time. So the last question from General Zod is, are you only working on Shelly, or are you working on multiple products or projects?
Yes, we're working on multiple products and projects consistently. The research doesn't stop. We're constantly looking at not just the baseline between Shelley and Gauguin and Voltaire and Basho, but we're also looking at improvements, other areas that we want to research. I'm not going to divulge anything at this point, but there are quite a few things that we have in our pipeline that are in research phase that we'll start bringing out as soon as we get the story and the canvases built out for them, which is basically product management speak for is we have a funded project we want to actually start looking into, and we are going to ask the community for support.
Okay.
All right. Thank you,
That's
General
good.
Zod. Yes, and thank you, General Zod. Thank you, Aparna. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you for putting the dates in my mouth too. That's wonderful.
No, I didn't put them in your mouth. People hold me accountable for that. Like, what the hell is he talking about? How the hell did he come up with that date? I just pulled it out of my back end. I get up my chicken bones and wooden cup, and I ask the chicken bones, "What's a good date?" June 31st. That sounds. June 21st. That sounds good.
All right. Next question. So, Adattainment corrected General Zod. That's not a question, but thank you, Adattainment, for saying that it's not an ITN. Haskell won't be an ITN. It's going to just be a test net. So the next question is from Mobile.
That does lead to a good question. And that is, When we go to Haskell testnet, will the Haskell testnet and the Rust testnet like run in parallel? Now that might not be for Aparna, but we might want to revisit that question later. Like, because the Haskell won't be incentivized. So will the Rust testnet, we just turn it off, or how's that go?
No, we're not planning to just turn it off. So there will be a certain overlap. We're not just going to turn off, as people are earning rewards there. We're not just going to turn it off. So we'll come up with the migration plan. It's not only the experience of migrating the stake pool operators, but it's also what we're going to be doing with the testnet. So there is a plan in place right now for that. I'm just not going to be able to share too many details yet on it.
Okay. Don't worry. We'll find out on Charles's Twitter. He'll end up tweeting it out when you're not expecting it.
Yeah.
We've seen it before. Don't worry about
it. Next question.
It'll keep you in the hot seat.
Okay. That's my job.
Next question. Mobile Dance Team says, I preface that I am a software engineering student. Has there ever been a discussion at IOHK to organize the GitHub account to better communicate what repositories are for what projects, i.e. like folders for the original Cardano implementation, now deprecated, the exploratory Rust implementation, and the final Haskell implementation? I know a rewrite of Cardano docs is on the way, but is there a cleanup initiative underway to make the GitHub not quite so esoteric, considering one of its major purposes is accountability and the other one is for learning?
That's great feedback. Thank you for that question. And coming from a student, that's actually a great question, because people don't think about it when they start getting into the thick of things. But yes, so we don't have a necessarily like an initiative similar to Cardano docs. However, my team is very well aware that the GitHub repositories need cleanup, and actually the backend team has already started working on that, about cleaning it up and making it a little more clear and concise. And we'll probably roll that out to everybody else, the node and the other areas as well. But thanks for bringing that up. I'll definitely pass that along as another consideration for us.
All right.
Yeah, I guess what they're saying, there's a lot of categories to pick through.
Yeah, I saw that. Yep, absolutely.
All right, cool.
Thank you, Mobile Dance Team. Rick, you want to get the next question?
Yeah. So the next one goes down to Moon Potato 123. How are the sprints coming along? We touched on that one earlier. We're good to go there.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yes.
And then X61IK says legal structure of Cardano in depth. I don't think that's not your field, is it?
No, that wouldn't. No, we'll probably skip that one.
Yeah, legal structure. It would be for different guests. So we'll save that for future guests. Okay,
yeah. When someone from the legal team comes, then you can ask them that.
Yeah.
Rick, get the next question.
So that takes us back to a Mobile Dance Team. And thank you, Redditors. We don't want to just blow your questions off. We'll make sure we visit these for when we have the right person on to answer those questions. Those aren't good questions for me and Philippe to take shots at. They're just not for you can't take shots at those ones. Mobile Dance Team asks, would it be possible to add progress columns? For example, research, Rust intermediary, and final Haskell to the work scope items on the Cardano roadmap, so that both new and existing Cardanians can see in a non-intrusive way, a precise way, where are we at on the different features. I don't mean dates, just statuses like active, ready for launch, and launched. So
absolutely. That's a great suggestion. And that with progress bars on where we're at, I think we should communicate that to the community. So thank you. That's a good suggestion.
That is. Thank you, Mobile Dance Team. Philippe.
Rick, you remember back in the day when there was like every week there would be a countdown, and then the progress bar would. People were excited back then. That was exciting.
It was, but then
I'm sure
it popped everybody's bubble.
Yeah, but
you know where they do have good statuses is on GitHub itself. Under some of the categories, it will have checkmark means it's done and it's being implemented in Rust or Haskell. Then it has an X meaning it's not going into that version. Then it has a little construction symbol meaning under construction. So something kind of along that lines. But that's a great idea. That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That'd be really cool. A little more granular than the current roadmap.
Yes.
I think is what they're looking for.
So the next question is from Mobile Dance Team, another one. If the teams are compartmentalized for Shelley, Gauguin, Basho, and Voltaire, is there a possibility that they may end up being released to mainnet in a different order?
Yes, that goes back to the whole waterfall and agile question, right? So they're not necessarily compartmentalized. They do have different skill sets. So from a technical standard, yes, so the people working on Gauguin might not necessarily work on Shelley because it might be a different technical skill set. However, they may be able to work on Voltaire or Basho, for example. So we don't really silo ourselves too much. And whatever silo has happened, we're trying to de-silo it so that everybody understands what the other themes and foundational or pillars are doing. If the question is it going to be launched in more of a waterfall manner? I don't necessarily think so. Right? That's what we're planning to do, is try to get things out before one is completed and said complete. So I might have something from Gauguin out before Shelley is feature complete, for example, to test. The same thing with the treasury or the voting. Maybe scalability will come afterwards. Like it basically is a moving scale a little bit because we're trying to get all of them worked on right now. And it's a matter of which ones we complete so we can start getting that feedback as quickly as possible. So I'm not tied to saying, no, I've got to have this one first and then I'm going to get this one. There's certain waterfalls that have to happen, like the found Byron has to happen before anything else, right? It's a foundation. But other than that, no, we're planning to launch and or roll out. I shouldn't say launch. We're planning to roll out as much as possible, as quickly as possible.
Okay. So is it kind of like the Shelley? Once Shelley's released in a decentralized environment, it kind of gives you a little more flexibility, maybe.
It does, because Shelley in itself, like that's the whole table stakes thing you said you didn't understand, right? There's certain things we've got to do with Shelley. In a way, Shelley's also foundational, right? Apart from the decentralization, it's also foundational. Once we get that out, there's a ton of other things that we can put onto Shelley that we don't necessarily need Gauguin for, or we might not need the scalability just yet, right? That we can start testing things out. So the roadmap, for as beautiful as it looked, moving things around so we can get quicker is the key.
Excellent. Thank you, Aparna. And Philippe, we're at 50 minutes now, and that was a lot of information. What else you got?
Yes, I have one question that was texted to me this morning from Glenn, so I'm pulling it up on my phone right now. Just give me a second. 1 second.
Yeah, we have those outliers we can touch on.
Yes, so Glenn says, when Shelley goes live, are the epochs going to be every day like the testnet or every 5 days like the mainnet?
I do not know that. We'll have to ask our delivery team.
Okay. That sounds good.
All right. Yeah. All right. I think that covers it.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll check with the delivery team on that. I'm wondering, I don't know if it could shift off of 5 days, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
I think we'd have to roll over to 5 days.
The reason why he was asking was because during the ITN, if you switch pools, it usually takes a couple days for your rewards to start kicking in. So a couple epochs. So if that's the case for the mainnet, then if you're switching pool, intra-pool, it may take like a week, in order for you to start getting rewards. So I guess he's thinking about it more from a strategy perspective than anything.
Okay, I'll take that back and work with our team and find out. But thank you for that. That's a good question.
Excellent. And Aparna, I have no other questions. Thank you very much for being with us here on the podcast. I learned a lot from you. I learned so much every podcast. Our previous podcast with Casey Monroe, I got a much better insight on community management from him. And I thought, wow, I never thought of some of the things he said. And one of the examples to take a quote from his was, your community is only as good as the worst people you let in it. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's right. I've been seeing that for years and never even put that to a thought. And it was absolutely brilliant. So I've learned a lot here from you as well, as far as what does high-level management have to look at with all the different processes you have going on, because you have to manage people and processes and a product output, and it's a lot of work. I admire your work, and I glad you're here. I'm glad to have you. Philippe, that's all I got.
Yes. I think we can wrap this up. So I'm going to give you the final words, Aparna. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to the Cardano Effect podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for viewing. Please hit that like and share a comment with us, share it on Twitter. And we are consistently bringing you new and exciting guests to the podcast to try to keep it as entertaining and educational as possible. So Aparna, do you have any last words for the viewers and listeners of the Cardano Effect? Thank you so much, by the way, for joining us today.
Absolutely. I truly appreciate being here. Any opportunity I can get or my team can get to make our viewers and make our community feel better about what we're doing here and how we're doing it, I'm game. It's I want them to truly understand that what we're working on here is visionary, but it is going to be in increments, and the increments really are about bringing them into our process. So how do we bring our community into our product development process and not just be a research formal methods company, but also have the user feedback into some of the key areas, just like what we're doing right now with performance and reliability on the syncing times and connections. And that's a small piece, but that's a part of it. Or deadless, when you guys download the flight and the issues that some of you have, or some of the good things you might face with it. We love to know that, because that helps us get better the next time around. We want this to be a pretty open-ended product development process. And we also want Cardano to become more of a delivery organization where we're putting innovation out as quickly as possible, that in a beautiful way. And what I mean by beautiful way, it's a great user experience. So given that we do have a lot of work, everybody on my team, the Cardano, the cross-functional teams that I work with, we all love our jobs. We're all happy to be here. And we're so excited to be a part of this. And at the same token, I do want to end with just everybody, please stay safe. Like I said, this is, we don't stop working because this is kind of our culture. We're a remote company, but a lot of people have been affected by this, and it is weighing on our minds. So at least Cardano and IO give us a sense of normalcy because we come to work and we do our jobs. Our jobs haven't stopped, but that doesn't mean we're not thinking about what everything else that's going around outside. And our thoughts are with everybody during this difficult time. So stay safe, everybody. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Aparna.
Thank you.
And until the next episode of the Cardano Effect. Bye, everyone.